Active landscapes, Kyoto Prefecture. Satayana Forest in December. Sometimes the life of the forest is most evident as it bursts through obstacles. Farmers chop winter chills. Life still breaks through. 11. The life of the forest. To walk attentively through a forest, even a damaged one, is to be caught by the abundance of life, ancient and new, underfoot and reaching into the light. But how does one tell the life of the forest? We might begin by looking for drama and adventure beyond the activities of humans. Yet we are not used to reading stories without human heroes. This is the puzzle that informs this section of the book. Can I show landscape as the protagonist of an adventure in which humans are only one kind of participant? Over the past few decades, many kinds of scholars have shown that allowing only human protagonists into our stories is not just ordinary human bias, it is a cultural agenda tied to dreams of progress through modernization. 1. When reflections on this problem have emerged from science studies. Example, Bruno Latour. Where are the missing masses in technology and society? Edition Deborah Johnson and Jameson Wetmore. 151 to 180, Cambridge, Massachusetts, MIT Press, 2008. Indigenous Studies. Example, Marisol de la Cadena. Indigenous Cosmopolitics in the Andes. Conceptual Reflections Beyond Politics. Cultural Anthropology, 2592, 2010. 334 to 370. Postcolonial Theory. Depeche Chakrabarti. Provincializing Europe. Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press, 2000. New Materialism. Example, Jane Bennett, Vibrant Manner. Durham, North Carolina, DDP University Press, 2010. And Folklore and Fiction. Ursula Le Guin, Buffalo Gals, and Other Animal Presences. Santa Barbara, California, Copper Press, 1987. There are other ways of making worlds. Anthropologists have become interested, for example, in how subsistence hunters recognize other living beings as persons, that is, protagonists of stories. 2. Richard Nelson, Make Prayers to the Raven, A Koyukon Review of the Northern Forest, Chicago University Chicago Press, 1983. Rain Willerslove, Soul Hunters, Hunting Animals in Personhood Among the Siberian Utagirs, Berkeley University of California Press, 2007. Vivieros de Castro, Cosmological Deixis, cited in Chapter 1 and 7. Indeed, how could it be otherwise? Yet expectations of progress block this insight. Talking animals are for children and primitives. Their voice is silent. We imagine well-being without them. We trample over them for our advancement. We forget that collaborative survival requires cross-species coordinations. To enlarge what is possible, we need other kinds of stories, including adventures of landscapes. 3. Some humanists worry about the politics of the word landscape, because one of its genealogies leads to landscape painting, with its distance between viewer and science. As Kenneth Elwig reminds us, however, another genealogy leads to the political unit in which moods could be convened. Recovering the substantive nature of landscape. Annals of the Association of American Geographers, 8694, 1996. Now, landscapes are places for gotcha assemblages, that is, for moods that include both human and non-human participants. One place to begin is a nematode, and a thesis on livability. Call me Bursophilinchus xylophilus. I'm a tiny worm-like creature, a nematode, and I spend most of my time crunching the insides of pine trees. But my kin are as well-traveled as any whaler sailing the seven seas. Stick with me and I'll tell you about some curious voyages. But wait, who would want to hear about the world from a worm? That was, in effect, the question addressed by Jacob von Uexküll in 1934, when he described the world experienced by a tick. Well, for Jacob von Uexküll, a foray into the world of animals and humans, translated Joseph D. O'Neill, 1934, in Minneapolis University, Minnesota Press, 2010. Working with the tick's sensory abilities, such as its ability to detect the heat of a mammal, and thus a potential blood meal, Uexküll showed that a tick knows and makes worlds. His approach brought landscapes to life as scenes of sensuous activity, creatures were not to be treated as inert objects but as knowing subjects. And yet, Yoke-School's ideas of affordances limited his stick to the bubble-like world of its few senses. Caught in the small frame of space and time, it was not a participant in the wider rhythms and histories of the landscape. 5. This is not enough. As the voyages of Bucephalinchus xylophilus, the pine with nematode, will nematode attest. Consider one of the most colorful. Pine wilt nematodes are unable to move from tree to tree without the help of pine sawyer beetles, who carry them without benefit to themselves. At a particular stage in a nematode's life, it may take advantage of a beetle's journey to hop on a stowaway, but this is not a casual transaction. Nematodes must approach beetles in a particular stage of beetles' life cycle, just as they are about to emerge from their piney cavities to move to a new tree. The nematode ride and the beetle's trachea ties. When the beetle move to a new tree to lay their eggs, the nematodes slip into the new tree's wound. This is an extraordinary feat of coordination, in which nematodes tap into the beetle's life rhythms. 6. Lilin Shao. Yoke-School's bubble worlds inspired Martin Heidegger's idea that non-human animals are poor in the world. Martin Heidegger, the fundamental concept of metaphysics. World, finitude, solitude. Translated W. McNeil and N. Walker, 1958, Indianapolis Press, Indiana University Press, 2001. Lilin Shao, Shou Sheng, Wei Wei, Haijun Hao, Bin Zhang, Rebecca A. Butcher, Jia Hong Sun. Chemical signals synchronize the life cycle of a plant parasitic nematode and its vector beetle. Current Biology, October 10, 2013. To immerse oneself in such webs of coordination, Yoke-School's bubble worlds are not enough. Despite this sojourn with the nematode, I have not abandoned Matsutake. A major reason for the current rarity of Matsutake in Japan is the demise of pines that result from the habits of pine wilt nematodes. Just as whalers catch whales, pine wilt nematodes catch pine and kill them and their fungal companions. Still, nematodes were not always involved in this way of making a living. Just as for whalers and whales, nematodes become killers of pines only through the contingencies of circumstances and history. Their voyage into Japanese history is as extraordinary as the webs of coordination they weave. Pine wilt nematodes are only minor pests for American pines, which evolved with them. These nematodes became tree killers only when they traveled to Asia, where pines were unprepared and vulnerable. Amazingly, ecologists have traced this process rather precisely. The first nematodes disembarked at Japan's Nagasaki harbor from the United States in the first decade of the 20th century, riding an American pine. 7. Kazuo Suzuki, interview 2005. Kazuo Suzuki, Pinewood and Pinewood Nematode, in Encyclopedia of Forest Sciences, editions Julian Evans and John Youngquist, 773, 77. Waltham, Massachusetts, Elsevier Academic Press, 2004. Timber was a resource for industrializing Japan, where elites were hungry for resources from around the world. Many uninvited guests arrived with those resources, including the pine wilt nematode. Soon after its arrival, it traveled with local pine sawyer beetles. Its moves can be traced concentrically out from Nagasaki. Together, the local beetle and the foreign nematode changed Japan's forest landscapes. Still, an infected pine might not die if it is living in good conditions, and this indeterminate threat thus holds Matsutake, implicated as collateral damage in suspense. Pines stressed by forest crowding, lack of light, and too much soil enrichments are easy prey to nematodes. Evergreen broadleaf trees crowd and shade Japanese pine. Blue stain fungus sometimes grows in pine wounds, feeding the nematodes. 8. David Reed, The Mycorrhizal Status of Pinus, in Ecology, editions Richardson 224 to 340 on 325. The warmer temperatures of anthropogenic climate change help the nematodes to spread. 9. Ronald Lander, Made for Each Other, Symbiosis of Birds and Pines. Oxford University Press, 1996. Many histories come together here. They draw us beyond bubble worlds into shifting cascades of collaboration and complexity. The livelihood of the nematode and the pine attacks, and the fungus that tries to save it, are honed within unstable assemblages as opportunities arise in old towns gain new purchase. Japanese Matsutake enters the fray of all this history. Its fate depends on the enhancement or debilitation of the Euxculian agilities of pine-wilt nematodes. Tracking Matsutake through the journeys of nematodes allows me to return to my question about telling the adventures of landscapes, this time with a thesis. First, rather than limit our analyses to one creature at a time, including humans or even one relationship, if we want to know what makes places livable, we should be studying polyphonic assemblages, gatherings of ways of being. Assemblages are performances of livability. Matsutake stories draw us into pine stories and nematode stories, and there are moments of coordination with each other. They create livable or killing situations. Second, species-specific agilities are honed in the coordinations of assemblages. School gets us on the right track by noticing how even humans, humble creatures, participate in making worlds. To extend his insight, we must follow multi-species attunements, in which each organism comes into its own. Matsutake is nothing without the rhythms of the Matsutake forest. Third, coordinations come in and out of existence through the contingencies of historical change. Whether Matsutake and pine in Japan can continue to collaborate depends a great deal on other collaborations set in motion by the arrival of pine-wilt nematodes. To put all this together, it may be useful to recall the polyphonic music mentioned briefly in Chapter 1. In contrast to the unified harmonies and rhythms of rock, pop, or classical music, to appreciate polyphony, one must listen both to the separate melody lines and their coming together in unexpected moments of harmony or dissonance. In just this way, to appreciate the assemblage, one must attend to its separate ways of being at the same time as watching how they come together in sporadic but consequential coordinations. Furthermore, in contrast to the predictability of a written piece of music that can be repeated over and over, the polyphony of the assemblage shifts as conditions change. This is the listening practice that this section of the book attempts to instill. By taking landscape-based assemblages as my object, it is possible to attend to the interplay of many organisms' actions. I am not limited to tracking human relations with their favored allies, as in most animal studies. Organisms don't have to show their human equivalents as conscious agents, intentional communicators, or ethical subjects to count. If we are interested in livability, impermanence, and emergence, we should be watching the action of landscape assemblages. Assemblages coalesce, change, and dissolve. This is the story. The story of landscapes is both easy and hard to tell. Sometimes it relaxes readers into somnolence, making us think we are not learning anything new. This is a result of the unfortunate wall we have built between concepts and stories. We can see this, for example, in the gap between environmental history and science studies. Science studies scholars, unpracticed in reading concepts through stories, don't bother with environmental history. Consider, for example, Stephen Pine's fine work on fire in the making of landscapes. Because his concepts are embedded in his histories, science studies scholars remain uninfluenced by the radical suggestions on geochemical agency. 10. Ronald Laner's Seed Dispersal in Plants and Ecology, editions Richardson 281-95. Pauline Peters' trenchant analysis of how the logic of the British enclosure system came to Botswana range management, or Kate Shower's surprising findings about erosion control in Lesotho, could revolutionize our notions of normal science, but they have not. 11. Charles Lefebvre, interview 2006. Charles Lefebvre hosts associations of Tricholoma magnivelare, the American Matsutake. PhD dissertation, Oregon State University, 2002. Such refusals impoverish science studies, encouraging the play of concepts in a reified space. Distilling general principles, theorists expect that others will fill in the particulars, but filling in is never so simple. This is an intellectual apparatus that shores up the wall between concepts and stories, thus, indeed, draining the significance of the sensitivities science studies scholars try to refine. In what follows, then, I challenge readers to notice concepts and methods within the landscape histories I present. Telling stories of landscape requires getting to know the inhabitants of the landscape, human and not human. This is not easy, and it makes sense to me to use all the learning practices I can think of, including our combined forms of mindfulness, myths and tales, livelihood practices, archives, scientific reports, and experiments. But this hodgepodge creates suspicions, particularly indeed with the allies I hailed in reaching out to anthropologists of alternative world makings. For many cultural anthropologists, science is best regarded as a straw man against which to explore alternatives, such as indigenous practices. 12. Okay, well, much talk excited in chapter 3, number 4. To mix scientific and vernacular forms of evidence invites accusations of bowing down to science. Yet this assumes a monolithic science that digests all practices into a single agenda. Instead, I offer stories built through layered and disparate practices of knowing and being. If the components clash with each other, this only enlarges what such stories can do. At the heart of the practices, I am advocating are arts of ethnographic and natural history. The new alliance I propose is based on commitments to observation and field work, and what I call noticing. 13. Human disturbed landscapes are ideal spaces for humanist and naturalist noticing. We need to know the histories humans have made in these places, and the histories of non-human participants. Satayama restoration advocates were exceptional teachers here. They revitalized my understanding of disturbance as both coordination and history. They showed me how disturbance might initiate a story of the life of the forest. 14. Pines were in Finland by 9,000 years ago. Catherine Willis, Keith Bennett, and John Brooks. The late quaternary dynamics of pines in Europe. In Ecology, edition Richardson, 107, 121, 13. The first artifact of human presence is a Karelian fishing net from 8300 BC in Vaclav Smell, making the modern world materials and dematerialization. Hoboken, New Jersey, John Wiley and Sons, 2013. 2. Disturbance is a change in environmental conditions that causes a pronounced change in an ecosystem. Floods and fires are forms of disturbance. Humans and other living things can also cause disturbance. Disturbance can renew ecologies as well as destroy them. How terrible a disturbance is depends on many things, including scale. Some disturbances are small. A tree falls in the forest, creating a white gap. Some are huge. A tsunami knocks open a nuclear power plant. Scales of time also matter. Short-term damage may be followed by exuberant regrowth. Disturbance opens the terrain for transformative encounters, making new landscape assemblages possible. 15. Simo, Hernelius, and Kullervo, Kusala, Finland, the country of evergreen forest. Tempere for the Forsen, Kirkkipiano, 1995. I also draw on field trips with foresters. Humanists not used to thinking with disturbance connect the term with damage, but disturbance as used by ecologists is not always bad and not always human. Human disturbance is not unique in its ability to stir up ecological relations. Furthermore, as a beginning, disturbance is always in the middle of things. The term does not refer us to a harmonious state before disturbance. Disturbances follow other disturbances. Thus all landscapes are disturbed. Disturbance is ordinary, but this does not limit the term. Raising the question of disturbance does not cut off discussion but opens it, allowing us to explore landscape dynamics. Whether a disturbance is bearable or unbearable is a question worked out through what follows it, the reformation of assemblages. Disturbance emerged as a key concept in ecology at the very same time that scholars in the humanities and social sciences were beginning to worry about instability and change. 16. Medieval farmers in Finland ringed pine and spruce to bring landscapes into broadleaf agroforestry rotations. Timo Neilientis, Mina Harris, and John Cummers. Sustainability and danger. Slash and burn cultivation in 19th century Finland and 20th century Southeast Asia. Environmental History 7, number 2, 2002, 267 to 302 for a vivid description of Finnish Sweden Sea Stephen Pine, Westall Fire. On both sides of the humanist-naturalist line, concerns about instability followed after the post-World War II American enthusiasm for self-regulating systems, a form of stability in the midst of progress. In the 1950s and 1960s, the idea of ecosystem equilibrium seemed promising. Through natural succession, ecological formations were thought to reach a comparatively stable balance point. In the 1970s, however, attention turned to disruption and change. which generate the heterogeneity of the landscape. In the 1970s, too, humanists and social scientists began worrying about the transformative encounters of history, inequality, and conflict. Looking back, such coordinated changes in scholarly fashion might have been early warning of our common slide into precarity. As an analytic tool, disturbance requires awareness of the observer's perspective, just as with the best tool in social theory. Deciding what counts as disturbance is always a matter of point of view. From a human's vantage, the disturbance that destroys an anthill is vastly different from that obliterating a human city. From a man's perspective, the stakes are different. Points of view also vary with him. Rosalind Shaw has elegantly shown how men and women, urban and rural, and rich and poor, each conceptualize floods differently in Bangladesh. Because they are differentially affected by rising waters, for each group the rise exceeds what is variable, and thus becomes a flood at a different point. 17. Timo Milantis, writing about the past with green ink. The emergence of Finnish environmental history, H environment. No single standard for assessing disturbance is possible. Disturbance matters in relation to how we live. This means we need to pay attention to the assessments through which we know disturbance. Disturbance is never a matter of yes or no. Disturbance refers to an open-ended range of unsettling phenomena. Where is the line that marks off too much? With disturbance, there is always a problem of perspective, based in turn on ways of life. Since it is already infused with attention to perspective, I am unapologetic about my use of the term disturbance to refer to the distinctive ways the concept is used in varied places. I learned this layered usage from Japanese forest managers and scientists, which constantly stretch European and American conventions, even as they use them. Disturbance is a good tool with which to begin the inconsistent layering of global and local, expert and vernacular knowledge layers I have promised. Disturbance brings us into heterogeneity, a key lens for landscapes. Disturbance creates patches, each shaped by diverse conjectures. Conjectures may be initiated by non-living disturbance, example floods and fires, or by living creatures' disturbances. As organisms make intergenerational living spaces, they redesign their environment. Ecologists call the effects that organisms create on their environment ecosystem engineering. 18. By the mid-19th century, timber outpaced tar as an export. Sven Erik Astron, From Tar to Timber, Studies in Northeast European Forest Exploitation and Foreign Trade, 1660 to 1860, Commentations Humaniarum Literarum, number 85, Helsinki, Finnish Society of Sciences and Letters, 1988. A tree holds boulders in its roots that otherwise might be swept away by a stream. An earthworm enriches the soil. Each of these is an example of ecosystems engineering. If we look at the interactions across many acts of ecosystems engineering, patterns emerge. Organizing assemblages and intentional design. This is the sum of the biotic and abiotic ecosystems engineering. Intended and unintended, beneficial, harmful, and of no account within a patch. Species are not always the right units for telling the life of the forest. The term multi-species is only a stand-in for moving beyond human exceptionalism. Sometimes individual organisms make drastic interventions, and sometimes much larger units are more able to show us historical action. This is the case, I find, for oaks and pines as well as matsutake. Oaks, which interbreed readily and with fertile results across species lines, confuse our dedication to species. But of course what units one uses depends on the story one wants to tell. To tell the story of matsutake, forests forming and dissolving across continental shifts, and glaciation events, I need pines as a protagonist in all their marvelous diversity. Pinus is the most common matsutake host. When it comes to oaks, I stretch even farther, embracing Lithocarpus, Tinox, and Casinopsis, Chinikakin, as well as Quercus oaks. These closely related genera are the most common broadleaf hosts for matsutake. My oaks, pines, and matsutake are thus not identical within their groups. They spread and transform their storylines like humans in diaspora. 19. Edmund von Berg-Curtimus, Suomenmansista. 1859, Helsinki, Metsälahti, Kustanus. 1995, this transitions from pine and Vestal fire This helps me see action in the story of assemblage. I follow the spread, noticing the worlds they make. Rather than forming an assemblage because they are a certain type, my oaks, pines, and matsutake become themselves an assemblage. 20. Hey babe, this translation is from Marty Atisari, Sustainable Forest Management in Finland, Its Developments and Possibilities. You know Silva? 200, 2056, 5957. Traveling with this in mind, I investigated matsutake forests in 4 places: Central Japan, Oregon, USA, Yunnan, Southwest China, and Lapland, Northern Finland. My small immersion in Satayama restoration helped me see that forests in each place have different ways of doing forests. In contrast to Satayama, humans were not part of forest assemblages in matsutake management in the United States and China. Managers that lead to anxieties about too much human disturbances, not too little. In contrast to Satayama, where forestry also was measured on the yardstick of rational advancement. Could the forests make futures of scientific and industrial productivity? In distinction, a Japanese Satayama aims for livable here and now. 20. Raw and processed timber accounted for 3/4 of the value of Finnish exports by 1913. David Bailey, A Concise History of Finland, Cambridge University Press, 2006. 20th century settlements dispersed in the forests following the work, a pattern that continued until the 1970s, when mill jobs declined because of competition from tropical wood. German Portolano, mill closure, because options for restart, a case study of local response in a Finnish mill community in Local Economic Development, edition Cecily Neal and Mercury 205 to 225, Tokyo United Nations University Press, 1998. But more than comparison, I seek histories through which humans, matsutake, and pine create forests. I work the conjectures to raise unanswered research questions rather than to create boxes. I look for the same forest in different guises. Each appears through the shadows of others. Exploring the simultaneously single and multiple formation, the next 4 chapters take me into pines. Each illustrates how ways of life develop through coordination and disturbance. As ways of life come together, couch-based assemblages are formed. Assemblages, I show, are stones for considered livability, the possibility of common life on a human-disturbed earth. Precarious living is always an adventure. Coming up among pines.